I'm joined today by our visiting scholar, Dr. Steve Willing. And Steve, we've been talking a little bit about the growth of the mind, reflection, growth in Christian character. I'm fascinated by an area of education called lifelong learning. And you mentioned something called a growth mindset, that growing in our perspective can be very healthy for the way we think and look at the world. Tell us a little bit about what is a growth mindset, and how is it beneficial to us as Christians?
This exact phrase I first encountered in a recent book called The Intelligence Trap by David Robson, but it expresses a couple of principles that, as Christians, I think we're called upon to exercise in our own lives. There's a negative aspect and a positive aspect. The negative aspect to the growth mindset is there is an alternative called the fixed mindset. The fixed mindset is one that does not learn from mistakes, but continues to make the same mistakes over and over again. The fixed mindset believes it can never increase in wisdom. We have this widespread belief that intelligence is a fixed character trait that cannot be altered. And if you believe that, then you're not willing to invest the ability to grow. But that runs contrary to the evidence, because there is actually evidence that people who do pursue success on an intellectual level can certainly raise their level of performance. Lastly, the fixed mindset is very content with remaining exactly where one is. The growth mindset is sort of the opposite of that. The growth mindset is an attitude that seeks to learn from experiences and not to make the same mistakes. Every mistake is a learning opportunity, so we analyze, we process. This is not the same as stewing over your mistake, but just saying, okay, what can I do to make sure it doesn't happen the next time? Then I'll move on. We talked about pushing your limits. Because someone was labeled as an underachiever in school, that shouldn't be an obstacle. There are countless stories of people who were underachievers in school who went on to accomplish great things. And lastly, a lifelong pursuit of wisdom. Wisdom is not optional. There are pervasive lies that infiltrate our consciousness, that infiltrate our culture. I talked about in the 1990s, there was this whole idea that we had to raise children's self-esteem, and that was a lie that led to a whole generation of narcissists being raised. Now the societal lie is that the world is a dangerous place, and we see this obsession with safety and insecurity in the current young generation, leading to unprecedented levels of mental illness. Now, what does this have to do with anything? The point is that these beliefs derive from a lack of wisdom. And how is wisdom achieved? Well, biblically it says the beginning of wisdom, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but that's the beginning, not the end of wisdom. We can get a lot of wisdom from Scripture, and all wisdom is consistent with Scripture, but Scripture is not all wisdom. There are many sources of wisdom, and the way to increase in wisdom is mostly by learning. Now, for me, that's reading. I read a lot of books that are culturally relevant. I read a lot of the contemporary literature. You read the classic literature. Both are wonderful ways of increasing wisdom, but not everybody's a reader. Some people learn through their ears rather than their eyes. But however you approach it, an attitude of lifelong learning is the only way to grow in wisdom, and we can't live without wisdom. It's not optional, not from a practical perspective, not if you're going to be a good citizen, not if you're seeking to be a good parent, not if you're seeking to be a good Christian.
You know, Steve, there are times where I'm a bit concerned that I'm around people who believe exactly the way I do, and I like to give consideration to alternative viewpoints. So I'll intentionally listen to people who hold different views than I do, that kind of challenge me and open me to the idea of not being static, but but learning and developing. So again, this idea of a growth mindset sounds intriguing and challenging for us.
Well, I'm constantly around people who think very much like I do, so I usually try to take the opposite position just to stir up the pot.
The alternative viewpoint can often lead to real exchanges. That's really good.
Makes life more interesting.
Very good.